and put in his collection. Eventually, I called the Lake Forest Park police up and told them to come up. I had something for them. I gave him 50 caliber machine gun bullets I had left. Didn't amount to a lot, but he was shocked when he saw what I was giving him. After a few days, they decided it was time to start entertaining the troops. So, being in the home of Mozart, they put on a symphony, but it wasn't Mozart's symphony, I don't think, was it? Anyway, I wrote letter while I went. I wrote a letter to Kay on the top of my helmet liner, which I had in my lap. One day, while I'm doing the arrangements for the show, I had parked the Jeep in the parking lot. Well, it wasn't a parking lot, just a square in front of the Mozart Theater. And we had done something, come back, and Blake, my guy I was with, claimed that someone had stole a can of sea rations out of it. I don't know. Anyway, he asked them, the Germans around there, who took it, and someone pointed out to some room up there in the building, and we went up there, and he knocked on the door, and the door opened, and he drew his gun on the woman and says, "I want my can of sea rations." Now that scared me because the war's over, and you don't shoot someone in peacetime without going to jail for it. So I don't know what happened. I can't remember now what happened, but he never got his can of sea rations. And we got the heck out of there, fortunately, without him pulling some stupid stunt. He claimed that he had been in the Navy and deserted and joined the Army. I never did find out why. After the war, many years later, he became a dentist in Fort Worth or Dallas, I forget right now. And one time he came to Seattle and visited me. I have a picture of him. So he was a wild guy. I could have got in trouble with this guy. I have not been able to chase him down, though. Beaupre was his name. In the Army, he was Bill Blake. But he was William Beaupre, according to what he told me. I have his Army serial number around here somewhere, so I could find him, I'm sure. We roomed together later on in Germany. Years later, when Kay and I visited Salzburg to meet these girls, we were able to tour the salt mines in the area. You could see what being sent to the salt mines really meant. The Romans sent people to the salt mines for punishment. They worked these for thousands of years. When we moved to Lake Forest Park, I got into photography, and I made a poster-sized picture of me with these two girls. And I kept wondering, what happened to them? Did they starve to death? Did they move? Did they die? What happened to them? So I managed to contact a TV station, ORF, that's the national network there, and tell them about these two girls, what I had done, and that I'd like to try to find them again. And they contacted, they made a big production out of it, and they had the police involved and looking for these girls, and sure enough, they found them there in Salzburg. And later, they invited us to Salzburg to spend a week there, which I did. Kay and I went to Salzburg, and they gave us a good tour of Salzburg. We also went to Berchtesgaden, Hitler's lookout mountain there. We also managed to go to some little towns around there. We saw they took us to the salt mines. They interviewed us. The professor there at Salzburg University was writing a book called Welcome Amy, Go Home, or Welcome American, Go Home, which I do have a copy of, at least Diane does. That turned out very interesting, with being able to see Mozart's house, Hitler's place there at Berchtesgaden. That is where the 3rd Division acquired von Ribbentrop's Mercedes that I drove to Paris and the Havre a couple times. I'll tell you more about that later in the next episode. We didn't stay all that long in Salzburg, maybe a month, or maybe a little less. Then they decided to send us up into Germany for the occupation. How they selected the units to occupy Germany, instead of sending them to the Pacific to continue the war there, I don't have any idea, but 3rd Infantry was one of the most successful divisions. Also, it spent more time in the line than any other, except perhaps the 1st Infantry, and that only amounted to a few hours. So anyway, we got the job of going up into Germany and occupying Germany. The 3rd Infantry suffered about 25,000 casualties during the war. And when you consider that most of those were in the infantry, you can see why the infantry isn't the safest place to be. Because it's almost a death sentence in a real war to be in the infantry. Personnel were replaced several times over in the several years that the 3rd was fighting the war. I wondered many times, why was it that the Germans seemed to have accepted defeat so readily? They were so docile. They were so friendly. They didn't seem to show any resentment. But unknown to me and us, it was there, and I'm betting it's there to this day. Where I live is a German war bride. She married an American soldier in 1948 in Berlin. She lived in Berlin. He came back to Frankfurt with her, and from time to time, the Germans, thinking that no one among the Americans would be able to speak German, would call them all kinds of dirty names and insult them, things like this. But she would speak up, and of course it would shock them that this American war bride knew German. A number of times she told me this had happened, that they were insulting the GIs who didn't speak any German. And she had lived through the Russian conquering Berlin. She herself suffered rapes by the Russians. She was very young at the time. Many women did. It's generally known. We know about that. But this is one that went through it. But in any case, I think to this day the Germans hate us as they hated us then. I went through this sort of in that interview that I did with the professor in Salzburg. She asked about this, essentially the same thing. Did we suffer, or were we the object of insults by the Austrians, little Austrian kids? And I said no, or even the Austrians, that if we had been, we would have probably taken severe retaliation against them. But anyway, I think the Germans still hate us to this day, and how we destroyed their whole country, destroyed cities that had nothing to do with the war to speak of, no war industry, Dresden, Darmstadt, and others. So I'd like if anyone knows anything about it, it'd be interesting to know what they hear. Interestingly enough, her husband was in the 3rd Infantry Division when he came back, or he might have been before he left, but when he came back to Frankfurt, when they were in Frankfurt, he was in the 3rd Infantry Division. And of course, within a couple of years, the Korean War began, and the third was sent to Korea, and he went through the Korean War also. Very interesting. The next chapter will cover our move up into Germany to occupy Germany and the various duties required to do that.